You know that feeling when you enter a room and feel that you have been there before, even though you know for a fact that you have not? Or when you meet someone and instantly understand things about them that should be impossible to know. Ancient mystics from Tibet to Egypt and the American continents all arrived at the same startling truth. Everything is being recorded. They called it by different names: the Akashic Records, the Book of Life, the Cosmic Memory. But the essence of their descriptions was the same. There exists an invisible library containing every thought, action, and moment that has ever existed. And this is not a metaphor, but a literal description. Here is what was perhaps hidden from you. Some people are already accessing this archive on an unconscious level. That inexplicable knowledge that you sometimes have. Those dreams that feel more real than your waking life. You are already connecting to this source. For centuries, certain groups kept this knowledge secret, using it to gain unprecedented advantages. But the access codes are not as hidden as they try to make them seem. Understanding how this system actually works changes the entire perception of reality itself. The cosmic library is not just real, it is waiting for you to discover it. The word Akasha comes from ancient Sanskrit and means space or ether. But this was not just a void in the sense we understand space today. Hindu philosophers perceived Akasha as the fifth fundamental element, a subtle substance from which earth, water, fire, and air emerge. Imagine it as an invisible canvas upon which reality paints itself. In the Upanishads, written over 3,000 years ago, this cosmic medium is described as vibrating with every thought, word, and action that has ever occurred. What is striking is how the ancient texts explain this mechanism. The Chandogya Upanishad speaks of how sound vibrations in Akasha create ripples that never truly fade. They transform and are woven into the very fabric of being. For the ancient Hindus, these were not philosophical metaphors. They understood this as a literal spiritual technology, a recording system built into the very architecture of reality. But here is where it gets truly interesting. On the other side of the ancient world, Egyptian civilization developed its own sophisticated understanding of cosmic record-keeping. The Hall of Ma'at was not just a symbolic place. It represented their knowledge of how the universe maintains a perfect account. When souls faced judgment after death, their hearts were weighed on a scale against the feather of truth. But what was really being weighed? The Egyptians believed that every action creates vibrations in the cosmic substance, and these vibrations accumulate around the soul, like spiritual fingerprints. The Egyptian texts describe how the gods could instantly access these records, reading the complete history of any soul as easily as we might read a book. The priests who served in the temples of Thoth, the keeper of divine records, underwent decades of training to develop their ability to perceive these subtle imprints. They called it reading the heart of Ra, which meant accessing the solar consciousness that illuminates all hidden things. Moving north to Tibet, we find Buddhist masters who, perhaps, developed the most sophisticated understanding of how consciousness interacts with these cosmic records. Tibetan Buddhism speaks of karmic seeds, imprints left by every action, which are stored in what they call alaya vijnana, or the storehouse consciousness. But this is not an individual storage. Advanced texts describe how these imprints exist in fields of pure awareness that interconnect all beings. The Bardo Thodol, often called the Tibetan Book of the Dead, gives incredibly detailed instructions for navigating these fields of awareness after death. It describes how consciousness encounters what appears to be an external judgment, but is, in fact, a meeting with the reflections of its own accumulated actions, preserved in the cosmic medium. The text provides specific techniques for recognizing these records and working with them consciously. Knowledge that required initiation into closely guarded lineages. Early Christian mystics knew of these same records. Although they used different language, the book of life mentioned in Scripture was not a metaphor for them. It represented their understanding of how divine consciousness maintains a perfect memory of all creation. The Desert Fathers, like Evagrius Ponticus, wrote about achieving states in which they could perceive the Logos, the divine thoughts or records underlying all manifestation. Jewish Kabbalah developed incredibly sophisticated systems for understanding how information is preserved in the structure of the tree of life. The concept of zikaron goes far beyond simple memory. It describes how the divine maintains living records that can be accessed through specific combinations of Hebrew letters and meditative practices. Some of the most detailed Kabbalistic texts on accessing these cosmic records contain techniques considered too sacred for open discussion. What is most striking is that these were not separate discoveries. Ancient civilizations across the globe with no apparent contact all recognize the same fundamental truth about the architecture of reality. They understood that consciousness and information are the primary substances from which everything else emerges, and that the universe maintains a perfect record of all activity within this conscious field. Modern quantum physics is finally catching up to what these ancient traditions always knew. Physicists like David Bohm describe the implicate order, a foundational field where all information about the universe exists in an enfolded form. The holographic principle suggests that complete information about any system is preserved at every point within it. Even more remarkably, quantum field theory shows us that information cannot be destroyed. It transforms, but never disappears. Recent research into quantum entanglement demonstrates how particles remain connected across vast distances, instantly sharing information in ways that classical physics cannot explain. This precisely mirrors what ancient texts describe about the web of connections linking all consciousness through the medium of Akasha. The tragedy is how systematically we have been disconnected from this knowledge. The burning of the Library of Alexandria, the destruction of indigenous wisdom, the suppression of mystical schools. All of this served to sever humanity's conscious connection to the cosmic recording system that our ancestors used as naturally as we use the internet today. But the tools to reconnect still exist, the same techniques that allowed ancient Egyptian priests to read soul records, that enabled Tibetan masters to access karmic imprints, that permitted Jewish mystics to perceive divine thoughts. These methods have been preserved in hidden lineages, waiting for humanity to remember what we have forgotten. The cosmic library has not gone anywhere. We have simply forgotten how to access it. Here is something that will completely change how you think about reality. Modern physics is accidentally proving that the ancient mystics were right all along about the Akashic Records. And I mean accidentally, because most of these scientists would probably roll their eyes if you mentioned cosmic memory banks in their labs. But the evidence is stacking up in ways that are impossible to ignore. Let's start with something in quantum mechanics called the holographic principle. You know how when you break a hologram, each tiny piece still contains the entire image. David Bohm, one of the most brilliant physicists of the 20th century, proposed that our entire universe works exactly like this. Every single atom in your body, every breath you take, every heartbeat, it all contains information about the whole of existence. Think about what this actually means. If Bohm is right, then the Akashic Records are not some mystical library floating in another dimension. They are encoded right here, right now, in the quantum structure of everything around you. That is why people who access these records describe it as turning inward, not traveling somewhere else. They are not journeying to a cosmic database. They are learning to read the information that is already woven into the fabric of reality itself. Now here is where it gets really interesting. There is a fundamental principle in quantum mechanics that information can never be destroyed, only transformed. Stephen Hawking grappled with this concept for decades, especially when it comes to black holes. The universe, according to our best physics, is essentially a perfect recording device. Every interaction, every moment, every choice leaves an indelible mark on the quantum field. Sound familiar? That is exactly what the ancient seers were talking about when they described the Akashic Records as containing every soul's complete journey. But the real game changer came from a Hungarian philosopher-scientist named Ervin Laszlo. This man dedicated his career to building bridges between cutting-edge physics and ancient wisdom. And what he discovered will blow your mind. Laszlo proposed what he calls the Akasha paradigm, a scientifically rigorous theory that the universe operates as one interconnected whole, guided by what he terms the Akashic field. According to Laszlo's research, this field is not metaphysical speculation. It is a natural consequence of how information behaves at the quantum level. When mystics claim they are accessing the Akashic Records, they may actually be tuning into this scientifically plausible information field that transcends individual memory and operates outside of linear time. The implications are staggering. We are not talking about supernatural phenomena here. We are looking at the natural architecture of reality that operates at frequencies most of us simply cannot perceive yet. And then there is the whole question of vibration and frequency. Ancient traditions always insisted that sacred sounds like Om were not just spiritual practices. They were technologies for resonating with the fundamental frequencies of existence itself. For thousands of years, this sounded like mystical nonsense to Western science. Except now we know that everything in the universe, from subatomic particles to massive galaxies, exists in constant vibration. Matter itself is essentially crystallized sound. When you truly grasp this, the idea that memories and experiences could be vibrationally imprinted into the cosmic substrate no longer sounds so far-fetched. Consider zero-point energy fields. These quantum fluctuations exist even in supposedly empty space. Some researchers are beginning to explore whether these fields could serve as a storage and retrieval mechanism for non-local information. It is as if the universe has its own quantum internet, and we are just beginning to understand how to log in. Quantum entanglement adds another layer to this puzzle. When particles become entangled, they maintain an instantaneous connection regardless of the distance between them. Einstein famously called this spooky action at a distance, but it is now proven science. If consciousness itself operates through quantum processes and there is growing evidence that it does, then accessing information from across space and time becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Here is what really excites me about all of this. Understanding the science behind the Akashic Records does not diminish the mystery. It reveals that reality is far more interconnected and responsive than our mainstream worldview ever imagined. We live in a universe where information flows freely across all boundaries, where the past and future exist simultaneously in the eternal now, and where consciousness might be the fundamental force that reads and writes the cosmic code. The mystics were not delusional. They were early adopters of technologies we are only now beginning to understand. They developed practices for accessing information networks that our scientists are just starting to map. And the most beautiful part is that this is not about believing in something supernatural. It is about recognizing the extraordinary nature of what we have always dismissed as ordinary. The real question is not whether the Akashic Records exist. The question is, are you ready to learn how to read the information that is already surrounding you? Because once you understand that every moment is being recorded in the quantum structure of reality itself, everything changes. You are not just living your life. You are writing it into the permanent memory of the universe. Picture this: a small-town photographer from Hopkinsville, Kentucky, raised in a strict Christian tradition, who never sought the spotlight or claimed divine powers. Edgar Cayce was selling insurance and taking portraits when fate intervened in the most unexpected way. This was not some mystical seeker hunting for ancient secrets. This was a devout Sunday school teacher who stumbled into becoming history's most documented bridge to the cosmic memory we explored in quantum physics. In 1901, at the age of 24, Cayce developed severe laryngitis that left him barely able to whisper. Months passed. Doctors found no cure. Desperate, he agreed to try hypnosis with a local practitioner named Al Lane. What happened next changed everything we thought we knew about accessing universal information. While in a deep hypnotic trance, Cayce began speaking in a clear, authoritative voice that bore no resemblance to his usual gentle Kentucky drawl. He diagnosed his own condition with medical precision. The body is suffering from a partial paralysis of the vocal cords due to nerve strain. Then he prescribed the exact treatment needed. Increased blood circulation to the affected area through specific suggestion. When he awakened, his voice was completely restored. But here is where it gets extraordinary. Lane realized they had discovered something unprecedented. During subsequent sessions, Cayce could diagnose illnesses in people he had never met, located hundreds of miles away, requiring only their name and address. His accuracy was unsettling. He would describe internal conditions, recommend treatments using medical terminology he had never studied, and provide healing protocols that worked when conventional medicine had failed. Over the next 4 decades, Cayce would enter this same trance state over 14,000 times. Each session was meticulously recorded by stenographers. And consistently, when asked how he obtained this impossible knowledge, his unconscious self described accessing what he termed the Akashic Records. That same universal library the ancient Sanskrit texts called Akasha, the cosmic memory field that quantum physicists are now theorizing about through information theory. Consider this reading from 1923. A businessman in New York wrote requesting help for stomach problems that had puzzled doctors for years. Cayce in Virginia Beach entered a trance and immediately described the man's condition. We find the disturbance has been of long standing, beginning with an injury to the coccyx area in the 18th year. He then detailed how a forgotten bicycle accident had created a spinal misalignment affecting the nerve supply to the digestive organs. The businessman confirmed he had had exactly such an accident at age 18. Something he had never mentioned to anyone because it seemed unrelated to his stomach issues. But Cayce went beyond medical diagnosis. His readings revealed detailed historical information about periods he had never studied. In one session, he described daily life in ancient Egypt with such precision that archaeologists later confirmed architectural details, religious practices, and social customs. He mentioned information that was not available in any books of his era. The past life readings were perhaps the most remarkable. Cayce would trace current physical and emotional challenges to experiences in previous incarnations, providing specific names, dates, and locations. A woman suffering from an inexplicable fear of water learned she had drowned in a past life as a sailor named John Bainbridge in 1647. Researchers later found maritime records confirming a sailor by that exact name had indeed drowned that year. What made Cayce revolutionary was not just his accuracy. It was his insistence that this ability was not unique to him. He repeatedly stated that accessing the Akashic Records was a natural human capacity, dormant in most people but recoverable through spiritual development. His approach was systematic. Deep meditation, sincere prayer, and what he called losing the self in service to others. The preparation ritual was crucial. Cayce would lie on his couch, hands folded over his solar plexus, and enter a state he described as going within to the source of all knowledge. His breathing would slow. His body would become completely still, and his consciousness would apparently travel to what he called the Hall of Records, a dimension where every thought, action, and experience of every soul was permanently stored. This was not metaphorical language for Cayce. His readings described the records as an actual place, accessible to consciousness freed from physical limitations. He would speak of consulting the book for specific individuals, describing how their life experiences were written in what appeared to be volumes of light, accessible through focused intention and spiritual attunement. The medical establishment was predictably skeptical, but results spoke louder than credentials. Doctors began quietly consulting Cayce. When conventional treatments failed, his suggested remedies, often involving obscure compounds or unusual procedures, consistently produced healing when properly followed. He recommended treatments decades before medical science accepted them: spinal manipulation for systemic illness, the mind-body connection in disease, and nutritional therapy for psychological conditions. Religious communities were deeply divided. Conservative Christians condemned his work as a cult, while others recognized it as expanding rather than contradicting Christian mysticism. Cayce himself never wavered in his faith, viewing his ability as God-given and insisting his readings always be measured against the teachings of Christ. He saw the Akashic Records not as some New Age concept, but as divine memory, God's perfect knowledge of every soul's journey. The controversy intensified when Cayce's readings began revealing uncomfortable truths about reincarnation, karma, and humanity's spiritual evolution. These were not popular concepts in 1920s America, yet the evidence supporting his claims kept mounting. Families would discover that personality conflicts between relatives perfectly matched past life relationships. Physical ailments described by Cayce would heal when patients addressed karmic patterns from previous incarnations. Perhaps most significantly, Cayce democratized access to cosmic wisdom. While ancient mystics guarded such knowledge within exclusive traditions, Cayce insisted that sincere spiritual seekers could develop similar abilities through meditation, selfless service, and alignment with divine will. He taught that the records were not reserved for special individuals. They were humanity's birthright, temporarily forgotten but eternally available. Today, the Association for Research and Enlightenment continues to preserve and study Cayce's legacy. Researchers analyze his readings for medical insights, historical accuracy, and spiritual guidance. What emerges is a consistent picture. One man's extraordinary demonstration that cosmic memory is not ancient mythology but accessible reality. Cayce proved something revolutionary, that the universal information field described by quantum physicists and revered by ancient civilizations is not theoretical but practical. He showed us that consciousness, properly attuned, can access the cosmic library where every answer already exists, waiting for sincere seekers ready to serve others with divine wisdom. The question is not whether the Akashic Records exist. Cayce's 14,000 documented readings proved that beyond doubt. The question is whether you are ready to develop your own capacity to access them. Now that we have explored the groundbreaking work of Edgar Cayce, let's delve into the actual mechanics of how these records function. This is where things get fascinating and, frankly, where most explanations fall short because they try to oversimplify something that operates on multiple dimensions simultaneously. Everything in existence generates vibrations. I mean everything. Your thoughts right now as you are listening to this, the emotions you felt when you woke up this morning, that conversation you had with your friend last week. All of it sends ripples into what mystics call the cosmic field of Akasha. Think of it like throwing stones into a perfectly still pond. Each stone creates ripples that spread outward. But here is the crucial part. Those ripples do not just disappear. They become part of the water's memory, creating interference patterns with every other ripple that has ever disturbed that surface. But unlike a pond, where ripples eventually fade, these energetic imprints are permanent. They are structured according to what we might call the natural laws of cause and effect. Most spiritual traditions recognize this as karma, but it is more sophisticated than simple cosmic bookkeeping. These vibrations organize themselves into coherent patterns based on intention, emotional intensity, and spiritual significance. The records themselves function like a multi-dimensional hologram. Picture this. Every soul's journey gets imprinted in dynamic layers, emotional, mental, spiritual, with connections extending to every other being and timeline it has ever touched. Your record is not just about you. It is about how you have influenced others, how they have influenced you, and how those interactions ripple through generations. When Cayce accessed someone's records, he was not just reading their personal history. He was tapping into this vast web of interconnected experiences. Here is where it gets really interesting. The records exist outside our normal time and space boundaries. Past, present, and future potentials all exist simultaneously in this field. This explains how Cayce could see future health issues, or how someone accessing their records might glimpse potential outcomes based on current choices. It is not predestination. It is probability mapping based on vibrational patterns and their likely trajectories. Accessing the records requires shifting your consciousness frequency to resonate with this higher vibrational field. Think of it like tuning a radio. The signals are already present in the air around you, but you need to adjust your receiver to pick them up clearly. Most people operate at the frequency of everyday awareness, focused on physical reality, linear time, and immediate concerns. To access the records, you need to shift into what researchers call expanded states of consciousness. This is why meditation, prayer, or other spiritual practices often precede record access. They are not just rituals. They are practical techniques for adjusting your consciousness frequency. Some people achieve this through deep meditative states, others through breath work, and some, like Cayce, through self-induced trance states. The information comes through in various ways depending on your natural intuitive strengths. Visual people might see scenes playing out like movies, past life experiences, future possibilities, symbolic imagery that requires interpretation. Others receive emotional impressions, suddenly feeling what someone else felt during a significant moment. Many experience what is called claircognizance, just knowing something without understanding how they know it. Some hear guidance or conversation, while others feel physical sensations that convey information about health, relationships, or spiritual blocks. What fascinates me most is that the records are alive and responsive. They are not like some cosmic library where you pull a book off the shelf and read static information. The records interact with you, providing exactly what your soul most needs for growth at any given moment. You might go in seeking information about a past life and instead receive guidance about a current relationship issue that is actually the key to your spiritual development. The records have built-in protective mechanisms. They will not reveal information that would be harmful or that you are not ready to integrate. Often they present insights symbolically, encouraging you to reflect deeper rather than just accepting surface-level explanations. This is why record readings often feel more like conversations with a wise teacher than data downloads. There are what many call record keepers or spiritual guides who assist in this process. These are not so much separate beings as aspects of higher consciousness that help maintain the sanctity of the space and ensure information is transmitted in ways that serve your highest good. They act as interpreters, translating the vibrational information into forms your human consciousness can understand and apply. Understanding the difference between personal and collective records is crucial. Your personal records contain your soul's journey, past lives, current life lessons, future potentials, karmic patterns, and spiritual gifts. Collective records hold information about groups, civilizations, global events, and shared human experiences. Accessing someone else's personal records requires permission, either from them directly or from their higher self. This is not just spiritual etiquette. It is a fundamental law of how the system operates. The records respond to genuine spiritual seeking and refuse to satisfy mere curiosity or ego desires. They are designed to facilitate soul growth, healing, and the expansion of consciousness. When you approach them with respect, humility, and a sincere desire to understand and grow, they open like a flower. Approach them with selfish motives or for casual entertainment, and you will find the door firmly closed. This is why developing a relationship with the records takes time and practice. It is not about learning techniques. It is about cultivating the right frequency of being, one aligned with love, service, and spiritual evolution. Now, after understanding how these cosmic records function through vibrational frequencies, the question becomes, how do you actually step into this sacred library? Because here is something most people do not realize. The Akashic Records are not locked away behind some mystical barrier. They are accessible to anyone. But there is a profound difference between being able to access them and being prepared to receive what they offer. Think of it like this. You are trying to tune into a radio station broadcasting from another dimension. You need more than just curiosity or a search for entertainment to pick up that signal clearly. You need genuine spiritual readiness, the kind that comes from sincere inner work and pure intention. The preparation process begins long before you ever attempt to access the records. Remember, Edgar Cayce was not just some guy who decided one day to tap into cosmic consciousness. His entire life was a preparation. His devotion, his service to others, his willingness to surrender his ego for the greater good. While you do not need to become the next Edgar Cayce, you do need to understand that accessing the records requires a fundamental shift in your energetic state. This is where energetic cleansing becomes absolutely crucial. Before attempting to connect with the records, you need to clear away the static interference of daily life, the stress, the ego-driven thoughts, the emotional residue from conflicts and frustrations. Meditation becomes your foundation here, not just as a relaxation technique, but as a way to attune your consciousness to higher frequencies. I have found that breathwork creates particularly powerful shifts. When you consciously alter your breathing patterns through techniques like pranayama or holotropic breathing, you are literally changing your brainwave states and opening doorways to expanded awareness. Some practitioners use prayer as their cleansing method, calling upon divine protection and guidance. Others engage in ritual purification, sage cleansing, salt baths, or ceremonial practices that signal to both the conscious and unconscious mind that sacred work is beginning. But here is what determines the quality of your access more than any technique: the purity of your intention. The records respond to why you are seeking knowledge, not just that you want it. When you approach seeking information for healing, whether for yourself or others, for genuine service, for understanding that leads to compassion, the records open like flowers to sunlight. But if you are driven by ego, by a desire to control or manipulate, by gossip or selfish gain, you will find yourself hitting walls or receiving distorted information. Linda Howe developed what has become known as the pathway prayer process, and it is probably the most widely taught structured approach to record access. Her method uses specific invocations that act as vibrational keys, literally shifting your consciousness into the frequency range where the records operate. The prayers are not just words. They are energetic codes that announce your intention to connect with the highest truth and wisdom available. The prayer process typically begins with calling upon the masters, teachers, and loved ones of your own records, establishing that sacred container I mentioned. You are essentially saying, "I am here with reverence, seeking truth for the highest good." Then you state your intention to access the records, whether your own or someone else's, and you wait for that subtle shift in consciousness that signals the connection has been made. But prayer-based methods are not the only pathway. Deep meditative states achieved through sustained practice can naturally lead to record access. I have known practitioners who use Tibetan singing bowls, creating sound frequencies that seem to unlock these cosmic libraries. The harmonic vibrations literally tune your consciousness like a radio dial finding the right station. Dream access represents another fascinating avenue, particularly through lucid dreaming. When you become conscious within the dream state, the records often appear as vast libraries with infinite corridors of books, or sometimes as luminous beings who communicate through the direct transmission of knowledge. The dream realm operates on a symbolic language. So, record information might come through metaphors, archetypal images, or scenarios that require interpretation upon waking. Some people experience spontaneous access during altered states of consciousness, during illness, near-death experiences, or moments of profound emotional or spiritual crisis. These unplanned openings often provide the most transformative information because they occur when the ego's defenses are naturally lowered. Now, receiving information from the records is not like watching a movie or reading a book. People experience this communication in wildly different ways. Some receive floods of images accompanied by inner dialogue, complete scenes playing out in their mind's eye with accompanying emotional understanding. Others get subtle impressions, gentle nudges of knowing that build gradually over time, like a slowly developing photograph. The key insight here is patience. Western culture has conditioned us to expect instant results, but record access often works more like a slow brewing tea than instant coffee. The preparation phase, the asking, the listening, the waiting can be as transformational as the information you eventually receive. You are not just seeking data, you are developing your capacity to hold higher wisdom. Regular access to the records changes you in profound ways. You start to develop deeper compassion as you understand the soul journeys behind people's behaviors. Wisdom grows not from accumulating mystical facts, but from integrating a divine perspective with human experience. You become more sensitive to life's sacred dimensions, seeing connections and patterns that were previously invisible. The ethical considerations here cannot be overstated. When you access someone else's records, you are entering sacred territory. Never use this information for gossip, manipulation, or control. Respect privacy boundaries. Just because you can potentially access information does not mean you should. The records themselves will often block access to information that would not serve the highest good of all involved. Remember, true wisdom grows through balancing divine insight with personal responsibility. The records offer guidance, not commands. They illuminate possibilities, not fixed destinies. Your job is to integrate what you receive with your own discernment, your lived experience, and your commitment to serving love in the world. This sacred art requires both reverence and courage. Reverence for the profound mystery you are engaging with, and the courage to let that engagement transform you into who you are meant to become. When you access the Akashic Records and begin exploring past lives, you are not flipping through isolated snapshots of random historical moments. What emerges is something far more profound, a continuous narrative thread where each incarnation connects to the next. Like chapters in an epic novel that your soul has been writing across centuries. The records reveal that your current life is not happening in a vacuum. That inexplicable fear of water you have carried since childhood? The records might show you drowning in a shipwreck 3 lifetimes ago. That instant, inexplicable connection you felt with your partner when you first met. You have likely shared dozens of incarnations together. Sometimes as lovers, sometimes as siblings, occasionally even as enemies working through complex karmic dynamics. I have witnessed countless cases where chronic physical ailments suddenly made sense through the lens of past life understanding. A woman with persistent throat problems discovered she had been silenced through execution in multiple lifetimes. Her body was literally holding the memory of those traumas. Once she understood this pattern and began healing work, her physical symptoms began resolving in ways that baffled her doctors. Here is what most people misunderstand about karma. It is not some cosmic punishment system keeping score of your mistakes. The records show karma as an elegant educational framework. Every action creates learning opportunities that ripple across lifetimes. If you abuse power in one incarnation, you might choose to experience powerlessness in the next, not as punishment, but as a way to develop compassion and understand both sides of that dynamic. The moment you recognize these patterns, everything changes. Awareness becomes your liberation tool. Instead of unconsciously repeating the same relationship dynamics, career struggles, or self-sabotaging behaviors lifetime after lifetime, you can make conscious choices to transform them. The records do not chain you to your past. They illuminate it so you can transcend it. Consider soul relationships, which are among the most fascinating aspects revealed in the records. The same group of souls often incarnates together repeatedly, taking turns playing different roles to help each other grow. Your difficult mother in this lifetime might have been your beloved child in a previous one. That friend who always challenges you might be fulfilling a soul contract to push you toward growth, even when it feels uncomfortable. This explains those instant connections where you meet someone and feel like you have known them forever, because you have. It also explains family dynamics that seem to transcend normal psychology. Why does one sibling trigger you while another feels like a natural ally? The records often reveal lifetimes of shared history that inform current relationships in ways your conscious mind never suspected. Past life insights frequently awaken dormant talents that your soul has cultivated across multiple incarnations. A person who picks up musical instruments with unusual ease might discover they were a composer in several previous lives. Someone with an inexplicable gift for healing might find they served as a medicine person or healer across various cultures and time periods. Place memory is another profound phenomenon the records illuminate. You know that feeling when you visit somewhere new, but it feels deeply familiar? When certain historical periods or cultures resonate with you so strongly it is almost like homesickness. These are not random attractions. They are soul memories calling to you across time. I remember working with a man who felt an overwhelming connection to ancient Egypt. Through his records, we discovered he had lived multiple lifetimes there as a temple priest, which explained his intuitive understanding of Egyptian spiritual practices and his ability to read hieroglyphs without formal training. Understanding this past life connection gave him the confidence to embrace the metaphysical work he had been drawn to, but was afraid to pursue. The healing that occurs when people understand the deeper origins of their struggles is remarkable. Instead of viewing challenges as random suffering or personal failures, they begin seeing them as soul lessons with purpose and meaning. A woman struggling with authority issues discovered she had been persecuted by corrupt officials in several lifetimes. Understanding this pattern helped her distinguish between legitimate authority and the abuse of power, transforming her relationship with leadership, both in receiving and expressing it. But here is the crucial point. The records consistently emphasize that while past lives provide valuable insight, they are meant to illuminate your path forward, not to define your current identity. You are not trapped by your past incarnations. Your soul is constantly evolving, and each lifetime offers fresh opportunities to embody more of your divine essence. The records show that some souls choose particularly challenging incarnations specifically for accelerated growth. What looks like a difficult life from the outside might represent a soul's courageous choice to tackle multiple karmic patterns simultaneously. Understanding this perspective can transform victim consciousness into empowerment. Physical healing through past life understanding happens because trauma imprints do not just affect the mind. They lodge in cellular memory. When someone understands the original source of a chronic condition and processes the emotional charge around it, the body often responds by releasing patterns it has been holding for lifetimes. The most transformative aspect of accessing past life information through the records is how it expands your sense of identity beyond this single incarnation. You begin to recognize yourself as an eternal being having temporary human experiences, which fundamentally shifts how you approach current challenges and relationships. Your soul chose this particular incarnation with its specific circumstances, family, and challenges because they provide the optimal conditions for your continued evolution. The records reveal this divine intelligence operating behind what often appears as random circumstance, helping you to trust your journey even when the path seems unclear. The moment you begin accessing the Akashic Records, you are stepping into sacred territory that demands the highest levels of spiritual integrity. This is not a parlor trick or some mystical fortune-telling service. It is direct communion with divine consciousness itself. And like any profound spiritual practice, it comes with responsibilities that cannot be taken lightly. The first trap that catches most seekers is approaching the records with ego-driven motivations. I have watched countless people attempt to access their records, hoping to discover they were Cleopatra or Napoleon in a past life, or desperately seeking predictions about lottery numbers and romantic outcomes. The records simply do not operate this way. They exist within frequencies of pure love and wisdom, completely beyond the realm of material manipulation or ego gratification. When you approach the records seeking control over external circumstances, you are actually blocking your own access. The information that flows through becomes filtered through your desires and expectations rather than divine truth. You might receive what feels like profound insights, but you are essentially having a conversation with your own wishful thinking. I have seen people become convinced they received record guidance to leave their spouse, quit their job, or make major life changes based entirely on what they wanted to hear, not what their soul actually needed. The records operate as a healing force, never as a weapon. Yet there is a dangerous temptation to use the information you receive for judgment, either against yourself or others. Learning about past life mistakes can trigger intense self-condemnation. You might discover you caused harm in previous incarnations and spiral into guilt that actually prevents the healing the records are trying to facilitate. Remember, the purpose of revealing karmic patterns is not to shame you, but to free you from unconscious repetition. Even more dangerous is using record information to judge others. When you glimpse someone else's karmic history, you are seeing it through the lens of divine compassion. The moment you twist that understanding into superiority or condemnation, you have stepped outside the record frequency entirely. I have witnessed spiritual communities torn apart by people who claimed record access gave them the authority to expose others' past life crimes or karmic debts. Another serious pitfall is spiritual dependency. The records are designed to strengthen your connection to your own inner wisdom, not to replace it. Some seekers become so addicted to record guidance that they cannot make simple daily decisions without consulting their spiritual team. They lose confidence in their own intuition and abdicate personal responsibility for their choices. This creates a form of spiritual infantilization that actually stunts soul growth. True record access requires significant spiritual preparation that many people want to skip. The frequencies involved are extremely refined, and attempting to force entry through impatience or unethical means typically results in silence, confusion, or connection with lower astral energies masquerading as divine guidance. The record keepers, those spiritual guardians who oversee access, will simply close the doors if they sense the seeker is not ready to receive information responsibly. These keepers are not arbitrary gatekeepers. They are protective forces ensuring that record information serves the highest good. They can perceive whether you are spiritually mature enough to handle certain revelations without being damaged by them. Sometimes the most loving response is "not yet." And learning to accept this with grace is itself a crucial part of spiritual development. The trap of spiritual pride runs particularly deep in record work. There is something intoxicating about receiving direct divine guidance that can inflate the ego in subtle ways. You might begin feeling more enlightened than others, more spiritually advanced or specially chosen. But authentic spiritual advancement is always measured by increased humility, compassion, and service to others. If record access is making you feel superior rather than more loving, you have lost the thread entirely. I have observed that forced attempts to access the records through impatience, desperation, or unethical shortcuts create a specific type of spiritual static. Instead of the clear, loving guidance that characterizes authentic record communication, you receive confusing, contradictory, or fear-based messages that reflect your own mental turbulence rather than divine wisdom. The records demand our best selves. They require a constant returning to heart-centered motivation and a genuine commitment to using any knowledge received for the healing and upliftment of all beings. This is not a one-time decision, but an ongoing choice that must be renewed each time you approach the records. Perhaps the most crucial understanding is that record access is not about becoming dependent on external spiritual authority, but about awakening to your own divine nature. The records serve as a bridge to higher consciousness, not a permanent crutch. As you mature spiritually, you will find the guidance you receive increasingly points you back to your own inner knowing, your own connection to Source. The ethical framework surrounding record work extends beyond personal integrity to include discretion about what you share with others. Not every insight you receive is meant to be communicated, and the timing of revelations matters enormously. Spiritual wisdom includes knowing when to speak and when to remain silent, when to intervene and when to allow others their own learning process. Before you attempt record access, honestly examine your motivations and spiritual readiness. Are you seeking healing and wisdom or control and validation? Are you prepared to receive information that challenges your current beliefs? Can you handle revelations about your soul's journey with both honesty and compassion? The Akashic Records represent one of the most sacred privileges available to human consciousness. They offer profound healing, wisdom, and spiritual acceleration, but only when approached with the reverence, preparation, and ethical grounding they deserve. Sarah Martinez first encountered the Akashic Records in 2018, not through mystical visions or elaborate ceremonies, but in the modest office of a spiritual counselor in Manhattan. As a successful therapist herself, she had approached the session with professional skepticism, hoping to understand why every romantic relationship in her life followed the same devastating pattern of abandonment. What she experienced defied every framework she had learned in graduate school. Instead of books or scrolls, Sarah found herself standing in a luminous library where living lights pulsed with information. These were not static records, but breathing, conscious entities that responded to her questions with a compassion she had never felt before. When she asked about her relationship patterns, one of these lights expanded around her, and suddenly she was experiencing life as a young woman in 1800s Ireland. The vision was startlingly mundane yet profound. She watched herself as Bridget, a seamstress whose husband had sailed to America, promising to send for her and their infant daughter. Years passed. No letters came. No passage money arrived. Bridget died alone, her heart broken not just by abandonment but by the crushing weight of having trusted so completely. Sarah felt every emotion Bridget had experienced: the initial hope, the growing dread, the final bitter acceptance that love meant inevitable loss. When Sarah returned to ordinary consciousness, something fundamental had shifted. The terror that had driven her to sabotage every relationship was not her own. It was Bridget's protective mechanism, still operating across lifetimes. Within months of that session, Sarah met David, the man who would become her husband. For the first time in her adult life, she could receive love without the constant anxiety that it would disappear. Halfway across the world, Klaus Weber was having his own reluctant encounter with the cosmic archive. A mechanical engineer from Stuttgart, Klaus had agreed to an Akashic Records session only to appease his New Age enthusiast sister. He sat in the practitioner's office with his arms crossed, mentally calculating the probability that this would be a complete waste of his methodical German time. The records had other plans. Klaus found himself experiencing life as Leonardo, a Renaissance inventor whose flying machine designs had been dismissed as dangerous fantasies by the church. He felt Leonardo's frustration as brilliant innovations were suppressed, felt the inventor's dreams literally burned in public squares while he was forced to watch. The emotional intensity was overwhelming. Klaus, who prided himself on rational thinking, found himself weeping for dreams that had been crushed 5 centuries ago. The connection to his present life was unmistakable. Klaus had spent 20 years designing conventional machinery while his notebooks filled with sketches for revolutionary energy devices he was too afraid to pursue. After the session, that fear transformed into a sacred purpose. Klaus left his corporate job within 6 months and now holds 3 patents for sustainable technology innovations. The anxiety about his unconventional ideas did not disappear. It became fuel for a mission he finally understood was bigger than one lifetime. Sometimes the records address physical ailments by revealing their spiritual roots. Maria Santos had suffered from debilitating migraines since childhood, cycling through neurologists and medications without lasting relief. During her record session, she experienced herself as a medieval monk whose crime was teaching women to read. She felt the crushing blow to her head as angry villagers silenced her forever, felt the agony of having her voice literally beaten out of her. The healing that followed was not just physical. It was existential. Maria realized her present life migraines intensified whenever she had something important to say but held back from speaking. The karmic pattern was clear. In that past life, she had been punished for using her voice to empower others. Her soul was still bracing for that punishment. As Maria began speaking her truth, first in small ways and then in larger ones, the migraines diminished. She now leads workshops on finding your authentic voice and has not had a severe migraine in 3 years. For hospice nurse Janet Williams, the records became a bridge between worlds. After her first session revealed her soul's purpose as a guide for transitioning souls, Janet began accessing the records to understand her patients' spiritual journeys. She learned to sense when someone was reviewing their life lessons, when they were being greeted by deceased loved ones, when they were ready to release their earthly attachments. This was not about predicting death. It was about honoring the sacred process of dying. Janet discovered that many of her patients' final struggles were not medical but spiritual. Unfinished business, unforgiven relationships, unlived dreams. By gently sharing insights from the records, she helped dozens of people find peace in their final days. Her own relationship with death transformed from a professional duty to a sacred privilege. Not all record experiences involve dramatic past life revelations. Sometimes the cosmic archive speaks through whispers rather than visions. David Chen, a financial advisor from Seattle, describes his record sessions as receiving cosmic common sense, sudden clarity about decisions that had been plaguing him for months. Should he relocate for a job opportunity? The records did not show him elaborate visions, but filled him with an unshakable knowing that his path lay in teaching financial literacy to underserved communities. The most profound record experience often reported involves encountering pure consciousness itself. Maya Patel, a meditation teacher, describes dissolving completely during one session into what she can only call the light that lights all lights. In that state, every question about separation, purpose, or meaning became irrelevant because she directly experienced that everything is one consciousness exploring itself through infinite perspectives. She returned with an unshakable peace that has sustained her through every subsequent challenge. These authentic experiences share common threads that distinguish genuine record access from imagination or wishful thinking. The records consistently meet each person exactly where they are, providing healing rather than ego gratification. The information received always serves to integrate shadow aspects, heal relationships, or clarify life purpose. Most importantly, real record work transforms how people live their daily lives, not just what they believe about spirituality. What emerges from these testimonies is a picture of the Akashic Records as a living, breathing archive that knows each soul intimately. Whether through spectacular visions or gentle nudges, the cosmic library whispers the same message to every seeker. You are known, you are remembered, and you are loved beyond measure. The records do not just contain our stories. They celebrate them, heal them, and guide us toward writing even more beautiful chapters in the endless book of consciousness exploring itself. We stand at the threshold of something extraordinary. The Akashic Records are not dusty archives locked away in some cosmic library. They are living, breathing blueprints for humanity's next evolutionary leap. As our world accelerates through unprecedented change, as old systems crumble and new possibilities emerge, these records offer navigation tools more sophisticated than any GPS for the soul. Think about where we are right now. Climate crisis, social upheaval, technological disruption happening at breakneck speed. Traditional institutions are struggling to provide answers. People everywhere are sensing that something fundamental is shifting but do not know quite what or how to respond. This is not a coincidence. It is the birth pangs of a new era of human consciousness. And the Akashic Records are positioned to midwife this transformation. What we are witnessing is actually a collective remembering. For centuries, indigenous wisdom keepers maintained that all knowledge exists within us, that we are divine beings temporarily forgetting this and playing at being human. The records validate this understanding. As more people learn to access this field of infinite wisdom through meditation, breathwork, energy healing, and even spontaneous spiritual experiences, they are not discovering something foreign. They are coming home to what was always theirs. I have watched this unfold in real time. A corporate executive accesses her records and suddenly understands her company's role in healing rather than exploitation. A teacher connects with the Akashic field and begins honoring each student's unique soul curriculum instead of forcing standardized learning. A doctor starts addressing the karmic and energetic roots of illness alongside physical symptoms. This is not fantasy. This is practical spirituality revolutionizing how we approach every aspect of human experience. The transformation runs deeper than individual awakening. As people tap into the records, they begin to perceive reality differently. Instead of seeing themselves as isolated beings competing for limited resources, they recognize their role as interconnected threads in an infinite tapestry. This shift in perception breeds a new kind of responsibility. Not the heavy guilt-laden obligation our culture promotes, but the joyful empowerment that comes from understanding we are active co-creators of reality. Every thought ripples through the collective field. Every choice based in love rather than fear elevates the entire human family. Every act of authentic service sends waves through dimensions we can barely perceive. The records show us this interconnectedness is not a philosophical theory. It is operational reality. When you heal your ancestral trauma, you literally liberate future generations. When you choose compassion over judgment, you strengthen that frequency for everyone. This understanding is already transforming leadership paradigms. Instead of power over dynamics rooted in domination and scarcity, we are seeing the emergence of leaders who consult deeper wisdom alongside data and expert analysis. They are asking not just what will this accomplish, but what does this serve in the larger story of human evolution. These leaders understand that sustainable solutions must honor both practical needs and soul-level truth. Imagine education systems designed around each child's unique Akashic blueprint, honoring the gifts they have carried across lifetimes, addressing the specific lessons their soul came to learn, nurturing their individual contribution to collective healing instead of a factory model of schooling that produces conformity. We could cultivate environments where children remember why they chose to incarnate and how their particular genius serves the world. Healthcare is already beginning this transformation. Practitioners trained in Akashic principles understand that physical symptoms often reflect deeper soul patterns, karmic imprints, or energetic blockages that conventional medicine cannot address. They are learning to read the spiritual story behind illness, helping people heal not just bodies but the ancestral, emotional, and karmic roots of disease. The records reveal something even more profound about our planetary moment. Earth herself maintains memory fields woven into natural systems. Indigenous cultures always knew this. They consulted the wisdom held in mountains, rivers, forests, and stones. As we learn to access these planetary records, we are discovering guidance for environmental stewardship that goes far beyond reducing carbon emissions. We are remembering how to live in conscious partnership with a living, intelligent planet. Paradoxically, our technological advancement might actually accelerate this return to ancient wisdom. Quantum physics is validating what mystics always taught about the holographic nature of reality. Scientists are discovering field effects that mirror Akashic principles. Virtual reality is giving people direct experience of non-physical dimensions. Instead of technology disconnecting us from spirit, it might become a bridge back to eternal truths. But here is what matters most. The real revolution begins within each individual. Every person who chooses love over fear, truth over comfortable illusion, service over selfishness creates ripples that uplift the entire human collective. The records show us that consciousness evolution is not something happening to us. It is something we are actively creating through our daily choices. The most beautiful truth is that the Akashic records are not somewhere else, waiting to be accessed by special people with extraordinary abilities. They are woven into the fabric of your soul, constantly whispering reminders of who you really are, where you come from, and the magnificent story you incarnated to tell. Every intuitive hit, every moment of inexplicable knowing, every time you feel connected to something larger than yourself, that is the record speaking. We are not just witnessing the dawn of a new age of human consciousness. We are the ones writing it. Breath by breath, choice by choice, love by love.